get the renewals that we have out there currently.
Will you be putting this out on the website? Yeah. Or
Yes,
something
I
that's like a
will.
one page?
Yep, I will send this PDF over to Craig and ask him to put it out there.
Eventually, we'll develop a frequently asked questions as well too. So this will be the seed for that, though.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Other comments on this? I know we've discussed this at the work sessions as well.
We'll work with legal counsel and make sure that we get the ballot language to the board. So most likely it'll be in January, maybe some in December, but Kim and I are scheduling that right now, so we'll keep you updated.
All right. And then, of course, we'll have to get community support for this and start working on getting groups formed.
Yeah, we'll do that outside. We'll do that. We'll make sure that we get outside people to do it. Yes, you're absolutely right.
All right.
Signs in your yard.
Canvassing. I know you did. Yeah, I know. I know you.
Well, I mean, just so we as a board do not go out and campaign for or against any levies. So, we rely on the community to get these things forwarded throughout our community here. And if we want to keep what we have, we need the support again.
Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you. Board committees?
Our first one's curriculum. There you go.
I'll report out, I suppose. So Alan and I had, curriculum. My brain was thinking policy. Ann and I had a curriculum committee meeting this beginning of November. I was like, when was that? And we just sort of started our foundation of how do we prioritize, who needs to be a part of the process. What else did we discuss? I mean, we didn't make any decisions or anything, but we just sort of are starting to
Saw the
kind of
data.
organize. Yeah, we looked at data, trending in reading and math, how we compare with years past, how we compare with other districts in the state, and just sort of in the beginning phases of what do we need to prioritize, how do we do that, and where do we go next?
Good. Yeah. Then our only other committee that met was policy.
That was Alan and I last week doing policy. I think the way that we're going to start looking at policy will be good. We're starting at the zeros and just working our way down, because at some point we have to look at every single policy we have. So might as well start at the beginning. So I think we got through about 15 things. So we'll be sending suggestions to you guys. The nice thing about the zeros and 100s are like the board, like laws and time. So majority of that's not going to need to be changed because a lot of that's dictated by the state. But I think we got a really good start to stuff. And then we also looked at some other what we feel are relevant issues that we need to be prioritizing in the district. So we didn't make any formal recommendations or anything on those. We're still gathering information on a couple other policies, but we'll be sending those out soon as well.
And everyone needs to be patient with us for policy because it's hundreds of policies. And,
Hundreds.
yeah, I think it's over 600.
Yeah.
So
700.
it's going to be a journey. Okay, that'll take a little bit of time, but we're committed to it, right?
Yeah.
And the administration's also committed to it. So just be patient.
We have a follow-up meeting scheduled in December. So even though we're going through some in sequence, there's a couple that we think we should pull out now. So we're just looking at policy 5600 or 5611, which is student discipline and due process. Good one to review, so we'll do that. And there's also a policy we've taken out sequence, it's 9130 public complaints. We think that has a higher priority as well too.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll have our December meeting, and then we'll be bringing information back to the board and let you know where, we need comment, and as we start to refine these policies where there are questions on something. I think those are all the committee meetings we had, Mr. Schwager.
Thank you. We'll move on to consent agenda. Do you want to present resignation?
Do we do a first and second on this first before we do?
Get a motion for approval of consent?
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
So I'll go through these quickly. First one is resignations. Names are listed there. Next, we have classified employment. Names are also listed there. We have volunteers in the next section. And volunteers are, they are not employees, but we do run them through a background process that's very similar to employees because we appreciate the volunteers and want to make sure that they're clear to work in the schools in a public setting. Food service substitutes also listed on your agenda, as well as unpaid leaves. I want to call your attention to Senate Bill 210. I'm going to read a short statement for you, but basically it's on our food service compliance, and this is something that years ago the board used to have to approve this, and now it just has to be on the record. So bear with me for a minute. I'm just going to read what we have to do as a school district, and then if there's questions by the board, please let me know. State law in Ohio requires each school district board of education and each chartered non-public school board or governing authority to adopt and enforce nutrition standards governing the types of food and beverages available for sale on the premises of its schools. Additionally, the board or governing authority must specify the time and place each of the food or beverage type is available and is for sale. The standards specified for beverages and food are minimum standards. Local districts and schools may adopt higher standards. Each board or governing body assigns staff to make sure that the district or school meets the nutrition standards in state law. The staff prepares an annual report regarding the district or school's compliance with the standards. Completion of the survey fulfills the district or school requirement to report to the higher department of education its compliance under state law or with state law. The board or governing authority must schedule an annual presentation on the report or one of its regular meetings, include the date of the annual presentation of the survey. So we will get that, to the board to review, but wanted to make sure to get that on the record. And that's it for consent unless you have questions.
Any questions on A through H? Call the roll.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
Move on to the treasurer's recommendations.
I wanted to just thank Mr. Bellard, Coach Bellard, for
yeah.
helping during the football, middle school football.
And do thank our new volunteers too,
Yes.
Sam and Mitch, helping out the high school baseball, middle school wrestling. Certainly all of our coaches are volunteers. Some are nominally paid, but they're all volunteers at the end of the day. So we appreciate all of them. Thank you.
Okay, so the treasurer's section is a little different with this new part. It's no longer part of a consent agenda. So each individual thing is an action item now. So apologize in advance for that. So the first thing is the September treasurer's report, which you all should have received as an attachment last week, or it should be in your files.
Take a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Can we get a second?
Second.
Any questions, comments on the treasurer's report for September? Call the roll.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
The next item is the 5-year forecast. We are required twice a year to submit this to the Department of Education. This is our general fund only, and one of the things, if someone is looking at it, that needs to be clear is we are required to prepare the forecast as if any levies that are being renewed do not renew. And so if you're looking at that forecast, that number, the bottom line number will be different based on if those levies don't renew. There is a little section down below that has the cumulative effect of if they do renew, what we expect that to be. But I want to make that clear that that does have to exclude the tax renewals that we talked about earlier.
I don't know if we got a motion on that one or not. If I can get a motion on the 5-year forecast.
A second.
Discussion. Call the roll.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
On to the board meeting minutes. If I can get a motion.
So moved.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Do you wanna go there, Kim? Like the 4 dates we have there.
Okay, Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
Okay, next thing is updated appropriations and estimated resources. This changed due to some changes in grants that we received. This number's changing.
I can get a motion.
I'll make the motion.
I'll second.
Discussion. Call the roll.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
Okay, and next is a list of donations. There are several, some grants, several from the April Bruning Memorial Scholarship. They had the fundraiser back in October, so several donations from that. Lynn Fruit Farm donated some apples for the Harvest Fest. Farm Credit Mid-America also donated some items for Harvest Fest. Kathleen Snap donated some money for instructional materials for Mrs. Hamilton's classroom. And Johnstown Athletic Boosters, again, for the Amy Bullard Memorial Scholarship.
So the Amy Bullard, and then we had a bunch for April Bruning. I also see we had Mary Babcock, monetary donation for Battle of the Books. Johnstown Choir for some 2 digital piano dollies. Of course, Richard Bruning, Bryce and Jamie Clausen, Michael and Cindy Hewitt, Mark and Susan Brumbaugh, Michael and Wendy Albert, Jason and Lisa Del Cicato, Rebecca Coolidge Perez, Kent Marianne Arnold, David Seeland and Susan Sereno, all donating to the April Bruning Memorial Scholarship. And then we have roof management in memory of David Denman for the scoreboard on there as well. So just want to make sure everyone, as we know, donations are greatly appreciated in this district, as in the community relies on the schools and the schools rely on this community. So these donations are greatly received. So thank you.
Thank you.
And if we can call the roll.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes. Did you get a motion on that?
Did we?
I have one.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
The last thing I have is something that should be a great excitement to everybody. This is the resolution to close our OFCC projects.
Hey.
Yes. So this is does a couple things.
Yeah.
Do we want to do that first, or do you want me to?
We'll do a motion first.
So moved.
Can we get a second?
Second.
We'll have discussion now. Thank you.
It does 2 different things. One, it allows us to officially close the project and return the remaining portion of OFCC's money to them. And then it allows us to return our locally donated funds that were the remains of the bond issue and our LFI dollars to our 004 building project. And then by law, transferring any interest earnings related to the local shares to fund 003 for permanent improvements. So there's a couple different things within there happening, but the bottom line is this finalizes our project, closes it out, returns the money to OFCC that remains, and allows us to use the money for purposes that we would like to use it for.
So the buildings that we built are officially,
They're ours.
they're ours.
Yes.
Always nice to see.
Seems like a parade is in order since 2014.
So again, thank you. Where do we, if you don't mind, if you could send out on our bond where we're at on that for the school, the payments. That was what, 28 year, 27, 30.
32.
at 20, are we at 28 years now? Okay.
Well, we
24.
renegotiated a couple bonds,
Yes.
so it'd be nice to see that.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd just like to see where we're at on all the bonds because we renegotiated bonds and resold them, and
Yep.
I just don't know where we're at fiscally on each of those. If we could see and
Sure.
when we're projected to pay those off,
Definitely.
I'd like to see that as well. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? Call the roll, please.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes,
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
On you, Dr. Wagner.
Ready? Our first resolution is on the 2022-23 bus routes.
Can get a
I'll make
motion
a
on each
motion.
of these individual, or are
second.
we doing this as individual? All right.
Oh, sorry.
No, you're good. You're seconding. Thanks. I'm still trying to figure out the flow
yeah,
of this.
I am too.
It's a lot of them.
So they're as presented. I'm sure you have them as backup. So this is question.
Any questions on the bus routes? Call the roll.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes,
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
Next resolution is on overnight field trips, and there's 2 field trips listed within this resolution. So you have the Ohio Leadership Institute, and then you have the senior class trip to New York City.
Get a motion.
I'll make the motion.
Can we get a second?
I'll second.
Conversation, discussion?
yeah, under this new format, we don't see any, and maybe I just haven't used the program, but what I'm seeing here is we don't see any of the details of an overnight trip, who's going, how many, who the chaperones are. Is it meeting the criteria that we want it to meet?
Thanks.
So I
You're the
don't know about
chaperone of the
application.
senior,
Tammy. Yep.
and Mr.
Okay.
Busenberg's the UN. If I saw the form was in the packet, but
Okay.
Yeah, it's
Mr. Busenberg's on
everything's
the
in the email if
UN.
you didn't see it.
Yep. You can click and
Yeah.
pull it right up.
But no, those are all good
Finding
things. If
a
you've
place
got any,
to live, I'm a little, I
Right.
don't quite get that.
Are they excited to go back to New York? You all are? You didn't like Atlanta? Didn't you go to Atlanta? Not New York, huh?
They're excited to get back and get out and have a normal, have
Normal
some
life.
sense of normalcy.
Is that-
That's what it
Is
really
that
is.
right, Tim? Right.
Thanks.
and I was Mr. Busenberg's doing UN, right? Is that
Yeah.
so?
Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions, comments? Call the roll.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes,
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
Next resolution is for the district's health insurance for calendar year 2023.
Can I get a motion?
I'll motion.
Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
So we're asking the board to improve the health insurance rates as we, and I know you have them in your backup, in the HSA plan, as well as everything else we want to do for it that we talked about already for the health insurance.
Discussion? I think we've talked about this an awful lot lately.
Well, and I think one thing I wanted to add is since Anna and I joined the board, we've been aware since then of the rising cost of health insurance, and we've put off making changes as long as we could, and we're trying to change as little as we can. So just knowing that especially during COVID, rates were really high, and we've been recommended to change much more things much more drastically, and we haven't. So I just want people to be aware that we're doing what we can.
And we're looking at other options too. I mean, Kim and Dr. Wagner really looked at everything. Roseanne and I joined them. Debbie Seibel, not to exclude you, Debbie Seibel back there as well. And we went through a lot of different options, a lot of different insurance companies, some that we've never even heard of, bid on us. We had multiple bids, and I think that was one thing last year that a community member got up and said that we had not gone out to bid. We did go out to bid this time. So I feel better about it. There still needs to be some changes, and we're trying to do what's best for the staff.
Well, and just to add to that, that's not going to be, we're sitting here 11 months from now having this conversation. I mean, there will be ongoing meetings.
Yes.
We need board involvement because as we self-fund this, we're also going to have live data. realizing it's not a mature year still, but we're still going to be able to see trend and see how it works through. And I do believe the education component is going to be the biggest aspect to help committee guide this, as well as to get information out to staff so we can have a pipeline and make sure people have their questions answered before we get into claims.
Absolutely.
Sounds great. Call the roll.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Abstain.
Mrs. Davis,
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you for proving that, because we will now get ready for open enrollment. So, and like I said, or Kim said, we're going to get out and
Health insurance open enrollment, let's be real
Yeah.
clear.
yes, that's right.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
I just want to make sure.
Writing in context, or she's context, but you're right. Yes, no. We know we can't do that with our staffing and building needs. But anyways, we'll get out and start meeting with the staff as early as tomorrow.
Yeah, yeah.
Comments? Okay, just a couple things. We were talking about health insurance. There's a lot of work being done, more than what you see at the board agenda, and we continue to work on the General Miles estate, and really do appreciate the partnership with the city of Johnstown and the Johnstown Greater Johnstown Greater Rexham Park District. And Mrs. Boer has been very instrumental in helping, has a long history. So, this is an opportunity where we're all coming together, and it bears the fruit. So more to come, but it's a work in progress. I already talked about policy. I had a nice meeting last week with the CEO of AP. Just meet and greet, kind of get to know one another, especially as projects develop. They're providing the service for Intel and, of course, all the other businesses. So I think it's good that we meet one another and do that. We also had a meeting with Ohio Health representatives. Robbie does a nice job coordinating with Ohio Health, and we're also looking at development opportunities there. So more to come, but again, just making sure we cultivate relationships. One of the things that the board has seen is some information on lacrosse, and there's no action required for you tonight, but we are working on lacrosse and want the board to consider recognizing it as a sport in the future. Just some background with the upcoming school year, we have 20 to 25 students expected for lacrosse. We're working with some of the members of the current lacrosse team, which is a club sport, and looking at equipment and other assets. There's some monies that the athletic boosters have already, and some are earmarked for equipment, specifically helmets. So I might be bringing something back to the board as early as the December board meeting. Wanted to compliment Craig McDonald, who's back there. If you haven't had an opportunity, but if you look at our website, he's been updating the website. The current website is antiquated somewhat by its structure, but one of the things that is beneficial is to update it so that when we import, or export, I should say, into the new system, some of that data will come over. He's also helped us build a social media platform, and that is continuing to gain membership, I would say, in each of those platforms. So we're getting the message out. So that's certainly exciting to see. And lastly, later in the week, Kim and I have a school finance meeting. We're going to be learning about school funding to see if there's any changes for the upcoming school year, especially with new legislators and what the initiatives are. So we'll be spending Friday on that initiative. And that's all I have, unless there's questions from the board.
Questions? Nope. We can do that right now. I do want to thank Craig. We do see a lot more being posted, a lot more positives out of the district. We've always done those things. It's just not been relayed out to the public what we're doing here. So it's great to see the residents and all of our town getting to see exactly what all the good things that are actually happening in the schools. So I do appreciate the efforts there, and it's paying off in the sense that people are starting to see a lot of what's occurring. I saw a lot of good comments on the Harvest Fest. Saw a lot of good comments on the Veterans Day events that we hold. So it's really good to see that stuff being put out.
It's making a difference. People like it.
I did want to add also on another note, I had a couple other items if no one else knows. I do want to thank Dr. Wagner in working with our township and our city partners, because it's going to be critical to this school district that we form relationships, better relationships, closer working relationships with the townships that that the school district is part of, and of course the city of Johnstown. Mr. Bernard over there has been really good to work with. Donnie has been great. We've always had a good relationship with the city. It's just getting stronger, and it tends to add to good things are happening between the village or the city. I always call it a village, but the city of Johnstown and us. A lot of good things are occurring, and Dr. Wagner is leading a lot of those charges. But it's critical to this district to work with all the groups, Liberty, Monroe, Jersey Townships, and then the city of Johnstown, because they control the growth. We're influencers, as Alan often says. We're not the decision makers. We're influencers in this, and they control a lot of what will or won't happen to this school district. So it's important that we work very well and very closely with them, and the relationships are getting stronger. So I do appreciate that on both sides of the city and Dr. Wagner's work there. So thank you for that. And the last thing I have is more of a personal note that I often complain about. I think you guys know the amount of litter that I see around the city of Johnstown and in the township and on the road. Please pick up trash, folks. We stress to all of our athletes when we go, I've coached baseball here. We leave things cleaner than we found it. That's the Johnstown way. I do ask, if you're around these facilities after a football game, after a soccer game, after a band event, that you take your trash with you, that you put it in the appropriate receptacle and recycle when appropriate or when available. But the amount of trash that we see left after events, I don't care if it's the visiting team or us. As Johnstown folks, we teach our kids on those teams. We clean up the field, we clean up the dugouts. Doesn't matter if it's our fans, our parents, the opposing team, whoever brought it, we clean it. We need to make sure we as parents and as community members carry that forward in everything we do. As we get into the basketball season, often we'll see the basketball game. After the end of the basketball game, the amount of trash that's left in the bleachers. Take that out with you, please. I really do stress that. I mean, yes, we have custodial, but that is not their main task, is to clean up after our folks or the visiting team folks. So I know that, it's not hard. We have containers. Please pick up your litter, please, everywhere. Thank you.
I know.
It's my pet peeve.
And I know that the sports teams in the band does that when we go to away.
Yeah, our
We
kids
do
are fantastic at it. Our kids really are.
They
That's
really
why I'm
do.
asking the adults to be as good as our
They might be
kids.
better than the adults. So,
Yep.
There was one other thing. I know there was a spirit wear sale that the athletic boosters did with some new designs. I just wondered how that went.
And
Hey, Mike could give us an update.
Mike, so we can record you, just
just
in case there's
curious.
questions?
Yeah.
It went pretty well. We sold about 100 items in 2 weeks. Next time, I'll probably do some things a little different. I wanted to get this one going and over with, so things were back before Christmas. I spoke with Mrs. Almendinger and Mrs. Wilson about next time getting a district-approved flyer to go home with the kids, because it's basically only being advertised through social media. So I can only put it on the boosters page so many times before it starts getting annoying. So, but it did go well. I heard good and bad about some of the designs, which, we didn't go too crazy. And of course we didn't have approval to do, redo any type of Johnny or anything. So we just kind of made some alterations to the head. Just kind of kept it non-sport specific because I don't want to step on sports spirit wear. So, yeah, we sold right around 100 items in the 2 weeks span. One thing I think would be helpful next time around is if I could work with maybe Mr. McDonald on getting some type of school uniform approved spirit wear, be like polos or like quarter zips. Of course, the logo will probably have to be a touch bigger than we are now, but I think that would be a huge hit.
Mike, just so you're aware, also, we're working with a rebranding company, so we'll want to get you to the table at some point too. We're just at the very early stages, but we're trying to standardize colors,
Okay.
Everything we use from envelopes, letterhead, all that. Mrs. Booer's going to help. Probably need another board member as well too, but just so we have the standardization, so that'll be something we can get you on the front end as well too.
Okay.
we're going to develop a brand locker from that too, so what we know is in and outside of the scope. It'll also help control sales outside of the school district so that we have actual control, and then we will allow through a trademark, allow others to use it, and then so like the boosters can, benefit from that if someone else is going to sell them.
Yes, and of
sell their
course-
items. Yeah,
yeah.
that's
I-
coming.
Yeah, that's kind of something I wanted to mention. I'm glad you brought that up. Is there's so many people using the school's brand and name that I think it has an effect on spiritware from top to bottom. If we trademark everything that we can, and maybe charge a crafter's fee.
Yeah, there's a whole process, and it's an excellent point because we actually have the ability to cease and desist, actually, that they cannot use anything that's the district's without permission. Can be for the nicest reasons, but it needs to be on point, and especially as we grow, we have to have control of that, so we will.
But just to finish up, the 3 designs that were out on Spiritware this last time around, and there was a 4th one that we didn't put out. They are yours. The gentleman that created them for us,
Okay.
they're yours to do with, to use, not to use. But the 4th one, I can send it to you in an email that wasn't visible in Spiritware. So,
And Mr. McDonald's very involved with the project because we have everything. There's large aspects of this, including some that's the back end of the website we've referred to in social media. So we'll definitely need the boosters involved at a later date.
okay, yeah, and that's great to know because I think maybe next fall, I kind of am stealing this idea from Granville. They had an actual Spiritware booth, and I think sometimes there's something about touching the product that I think will help. So maybe we can work that in for next football season, something once we get everything where it needs to be.
Sounds great. Thanks, Mike.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else? Any reason for executive?
Yes, we have 2 reasons for executive session. We're asking for one of the topics that we're going to discuss is consideration of appointment, employment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, or compensation of a public employee. And the other reason, there's another matter, consideration of the purchase of property for public purposes or sale or other disposition of unneeded, obsolete, unfit for use of property at a competitive bidding or premature disclosure of information that would give an unfair advantage to a person whose personal private interest is adverse to the general public interest. And in both these items, we do not expect any board action after the meeting.
I think the board needs to go as well to discuss number 1. Yeah. Do we have to disclose that? I apologize.
I'm sorry, number 1.
We will have an additional 3rd that will just be the board for reason number 1.
Oh, I got it.
Okay.
Got
Yep.
it. I understand.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
I don't know if we have to
I see.
disclose that before we go in or not.
No, it all falls under one.
Okay.
Consideration, appointment, dismissal, discipline, promotion, demotion, and compensation. So I think we're good. We have to call the roll for going in. Motion to go in.
I'll second.
All right.
Mr. Benton,
Yes.
Mrs. Boer,
Yes.
Mrs. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Swager,
Yes.
Mrs. Thomas.
Yes.
5:57. 5:57 and no action afterwards. Thank you.